take Matthew Jones next, Workers International Network, followed
All right.
by Roger Silverman.
Hi,
Okay.
comrades. Yeah, thanks, Dave. It was Matthew Jones from Scotland. Unfortunately, I can't change my name on this system because of the account. I think the thing is, really, we should locate this in terms of the crisis of the system. I mean, what we're seeing, obviously, is the whole system of imperialism itself is being torn apart. As things decline and decay. Now, I mean, obviously, that also extends to political organisations and political parties. Now, the traditional political parties in Britain have been shredded. The Labour Party is on its last legs. And the Tory Party similarly is blowing apart. We can see it. So the question really then becomes, okay, what form of politics do you have? Now, I mean, the problem being, of course, is that historically, of course, the Labour Party has formed a blockage of to hold the left itself, as one of its functions has been to form a blockage to the left. Now, obviously, the question will be, all right, what's the alternative on the left? So what we've got, of course, is then this effort by, you can quite clearly see by the media and the ruling class, to promote the Greens now, which is led by a guy who's clearly just a straightforward political opportunist, who used to be a Lib Dem, has nothing to do with the left at all. Polanski, and then we have the setting up of your party. Now the problem is, of course, with your party is that it's interesting. What's obvious is that Corbyn, of course, didn't want your party in the first place. He'd be quite happy to go back to the Labour Party backbenchers, no question of it. So we then have this organisation set up. So who runs it, and how is it controlled? And the thing is, okay, we now have a secret bureaucracy which won't even tell us their names, running a system which they invent on the hoof, having no records or minutes or any accountability of any sort to the membership. So we can see what's being done here. This is a real problem, in terms of, okay, well, how does it, and also, of course, another thing that was quite obvious, of course, is that when you get the first reaction to the sign up, 850,000 people sign up. That's the level of an actual response from the working class itself, the active layer of the working class itself, and that caused major fear. I mean, that was the major thing, was to make sure that didn't translate itself into anything, So there's been no effort to follow up those people or to bring those people in, and so we wind up with something that's a lot smaller. And then, of course, the effort to control that. So, I mean, what the interesting in Scotland, of course, is that the thing has worked in reverse to England in some ways, because obviously the Scottish Greens have been in government and made a complete pig's backside of the whole business. And a lot of their members actually have joined your party because they're pissed off with the way the Greens are run and the rest of it, and the fact that various things were done internally and so on and so forth. So you've got like the reverse process in Scotland. You've also got a position, that of course the other notable feature of the people running your party, of course, is their complete incompetence. Okay, they do want to form a blockage, but they're also particularly bad at running almost anything. So what's happened here, of course, is that everybody who's ever dealt with these people in Scotland, of course, they can't stand the sight of them. So Scotland is the only place where the person who's standing on behalf of the many, or Corbyn, hasn't yet got his 75 nominations because there's no support. It's quite extraordinary. And the question is then, okay, well, under those conditions, how is this election going to take place? What happen, and then what happens next? I mean, the obvious move for the people running the thing at the moment, once the elections take place, is either to rig the election because they're running it, or else if it goes against them, just to refuse to give any information or hand over the running of the organisation from themselves to the CEC. One of those two things,
Okay.
And then, but ultimately, it's then about a political question. It's to draw out the political significance of all these bureaucratic manoeuvres that's going on. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. And you can come back later, as can all the speakers. Roger, is your hand still up? Roger Silverman?
Yes, unless anybody else wants to come in first.
Looks like it's you, Roger.
Okay. Well, look, I think what is extraordinary is how patient and almost submissive members of your party have been at the incredible sabotage that has been taking place. We have a situation, if where 800,000 people were ready within days to respond to the initial call for a new party, and most of them have just melted away and have lost faith in what we could have been building, and we are still, of course, attempting from the wreckage to try to keep something together. 800,000 people. We we have a situation where there are something like 9 million people in extreme poverty, not just poverty, but it was just announced today, extreme or dire poverty. We've got mass arrests of people in protest against the first genocide we've seen for 80 years. We've seen hunger strikers being allowed to get to the point of death. We see the likelihood of the coming to power of an extremely vicious Trumpite, some would say almost neo-fascist government at the next election in a situation of far right government sweeping across Europe and most of the world, to say nothing of the USA. We've got all these situations, and what we do, we're allowing the party to do nothing. Why has it had to wait for all these procedures to go through before we have mass action, mass demonstrations, mass protests on all these things in the name of your party, or preferably in the name of in a better name for this party. And so what we have this instead of that, we see from at least a section of the leadership a determination to prevent the party really getting going. For instance, we have this monstrous thing before they have a policy, before they have a manifesto, before they even have a proper organizational structure. The one thing they didn't wait for was bans and prescriptions. A ridiculous situation. When you say that the people, of course, people who are in other parties shouldn't be allowed to take positions. Well, this was in a situation where there was no mass socialist workers' party. So, in other words, what were people to do? Were they supposed to just wait quietly for the great and the good to announce the formation of a party before they did anything? No, they decided to act independently and to build something of their own, to build something. We might agree or disagree with them, but they might have become sectarian in many cases and so on. But the point is that when there was no independent mass party, of course they took action. They organised, they mobilised, they tried to do something. Now you might say, well, now there's a mass party, they should disband. How could you expect people to? How have any of us got absolute confidence and faith that this party is a fixture and is going to remain in place? Of course, they'll still be organising in their groups. And if you say that people who've organised in groups of their own, and I'm not necessarily saying that I agree with them on all the issues, but if you say that we don't allow them to take positions in the party, then what you're saying, you're guaranteeing the most passive possible membership and the least accountable leadership, because it means that the people that you're promoting above the activists is people who weren't very active in the previous period and will be passive and will be just mute or mild supporters, and that is what is wanted. It's not a question of cock-ups. Of course, there's been many cock-ups too, but it's also a question of a just a lack of will to create such a party, and even a fear of where such a party could go. So that's why I think we have to have let's hope that we have a central executive committee which is going to be determined to break free of this straitjacket that has been put on your party, and it becomes a mass force mobilizing the millions against this horrific nightmare that is facing the population. Thanks, comrades.
Okay, thank you, Roger. I don't see any other hands up, so I'm going to make a few comments myself, and then throw it open to Nigel and Eric and any of the three speakers who want to come back, who spoke at the beginning. Okay, here's my comments, and I'll keep it within the 3 minutes. Many of us here have spent decades trying to bring the left together, the socialist and Marxist left together. Many of us here were in Respect, Left Unity, Tusk. I've fought numerous elections for Tusk, and when it had a semblance of a left wing 30, 40 years ago, for Labour as well. And bringing the left together is a great hope that many of us had when your party was mentioned and firstly formed. And although comrades have heard me say this before, I'm a great believer, despite all the problems that people like Trotsky wrote about, I'm a great believer in the united front against fascism or against neo-fascism. Unfortunately, we look at Jeremy Corbyn's platform, and I'm not going to repeat the criticisms that Roger has made in print and in words, and that we've probably nearly everyone at this meeting has made. It's a soft, Scandinavian, Nordic type social democratic platform which will not challenge capitalism in the slightest. So that's our criticism. But on the other hand, in a united front, it's no point the 10,000 Marxists or socialists, revolutionaries, anti-capitalists being on our own. We have to work with those and to educate and lead those from the left social democracy, many of whom actually listen in our local proto branches, etc., and in our various collective organisations, many of whom, or some of whom, can learn as we, to an extent, learn from them. So the final 2 points I want to make is, so what next? And we will be having meetings, not just us, Campaign for Mass Workers' Party, but your party, blah, blah, blah. There'll be meetings over the next year, and they will vary according to who wins the CEC elections. Will it be the many, or will it be the grassroots left? And there are dangers and scenarios associated with both. My final point is, so what do we want from this small but perfectly formed meeting? I mean, there's about 25 of us here. What do we want to come from this? Okay, so that's the end of my 3 minutes. I now see Nigel, Eric, and Matthew wants to come back. Nigel, then Eric, then Matthew.
Yes, 33 in the meeting, by the way, but and just a small point, Nora, whose contribution was excellent. I was sad enough, I was ill during the conference. I couldn't go anywhere. I wasn't sortitioned. And so I was laying in bed watching the conference, and I did time the contributions, and it was just over 50% was actually debate. It was almost 50% was speakers from the floor, platform speakers, Corbyn and so on. And Corbyn had over 10% of the time to himself. Just a small point. Yeah, I think we're looking at, depending on how this goes, it could go the other way, but it looks like the grassroots slate could be in a majority on the Central Executive Committee, a term I, as you know, hate. It's completely wrong for the 21st century. I won't go into that now, but there is the possibility of a split, comrades. We must raise that. I don't want to be pessimistic or negative, but I can't see certain forces within the current organisation tolerating the Zara Sultana-led Central Executive Committee. I've listened to Corbyn speak, I've listened to Sultana speak, I've seen them in person, I've seen their body language and the way they behave themselves. I'm much more impressed on a personal level with Sultana than Corbyn. I watched her for 4 hours in Huddersfield very carefully. Can learn a lot about people by watching people. It's not voyeuristic, it's political. How they behave, how they conduct themselves with other people. And I was quite impressed with her and impressed with what she said. I don't agree with everything she says, and sometimes I think she goes off on a bit of a tangent. But Corbyn, when he came to Bradford recently, he sat on the platform looking, I don't know, at his notes or something while other people were speaking, not paying, didn't appear to be paying any attention to what they were saying. And that meeting was structured in such a way it was just listening to platform speakers and various activists. It was a complete waste of my time. Whereas the Sultana meeting we're going to have in Halifax soon will be much better. It will be an open forum with contributions from the CEC candidates and Zara Sultana and a couple of local speakers, but also the opportunity for people to speak from the floor, ask questions, make contributions. I think socialism's badly misunderstood. Our proto branch, and I notice Carol Mitchell is here from our proto branch. Our proto branch is going to be discussing that. What is socialism? At our branch meeting in 2 weeks' time. And it's not, it's, because there's been a lot of misunderstandings and confusions just around the idea. Not surprisingly, it's highly complex. So I'm not saying people are being simplistic. I'm just saying it's difficult. So we're going to try and tackle that. I see this as a long game, comrades. I think it's inevitably going to be a long game, this, to build a mass workers' party. Unfortunately, we got very excited a year ago, and we've been disappointed because of the bureaucrats getting in the way of what we're trying to do. Let's hope when the CEC gets in, they can appoint people who are going to work in an open, collaborative, democratic way, and not renew the contracts if that's what indeed they have of the people who are currently doing that work. Because, as someone said earlier, they're incompetent. They're worse than that. They're deliberately obstructing the project and democracy. What we're trying to do, though, comrades, let's be right, is complicated. It's difficult. It's trying to move away from a top-down model. It's trying to move away from the old Stalinist structures that we've had imposed on us and the neoliberal structures that have imposed on us, and have some socialist Marxist structures, new and dynamic for the 21st century. Those are not structures that you'll see in the left parties. I've had close contact with enough of them to know they're not. They tend to be top down. We're talking about a structure where there'll be a fluid circle of ideas coming around the organisation. That's what I would advocate. And we need to hold the CEC members to account for what they're doing. How will we do that? Well, I'll be advocating some kind of regional committee with direct conversations with the two CEC comrades who are elected in Yorkshire and Humberside, which is where I'm from, so that we can talk to them and communicate what the branches are thinking in a more direct way. Because this form of mass communication just drowns out actual debate, and we'd like to have our branches where we make decisions and we can take them to a body and discuss them like a delegate system, if you will, so that we can communicate in a more efficient and economical way, not in a less democratic way, I think a more democratic way. Because what we found here is that some voices drown out the chat in the WhatsApp groups and so on, and other people don't get heard.
You're going to have to close you down, Nigel.
That's it. Finished.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Next, Eric, followed by Matthew. And then I'm going to, if nobody else's hands go up, I'm going to invite Ian, Nora, and Ian Spencer to make second contributions. Okay, over to Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll try and convey a couple of points in the 3 minutes. Um, First of all, I think one of the things that still inspires me in terms of your party is, despite um, what can only be described as a terrible start, there are still all over the country thousands of people that have formed proto branches off their own initiative, and although those proto branches might not have as many people involved as they originally did, there's still evidence of it right across the country of people involved that really want this party, despite the bureaucracy that we've talked about. So that's the first thing. There's a lot of mileage in this. There's a lot of good people that really want this to work. The second point I want to make really is to absolutely agree with what Nora said earlier. And I'd just like to add a little bit of background information to one of the things that Nora raised. And I apologise if people already know this. Some of us on this call, prior to the launch of your party, had been involved in a group called the Collective for over a year. The Collective was an association of different groups and small parties, such as there was a couple of delegates from the Campaign for a Mass Workers' Party. There was delegates from small parties, such as the Social Justice Party, Transform, etc., etc. And we were meeting with a view to helping create a new party. Now, at the time, a lot of those meetings were conducted in secrecy, and that wasn't in agreement with the wishes that most of us wanted. The argument was there was discussions going on with Labour MPs, etc., and we wouldn't want to jeopardise their careers, etc. Just after your party was announced, when Zara made the initiative to do that, closely followed by Jeremy, at one of the meetings at the Collective, as a group, we actually said, could all the different people that were on that group elect someone to sit on the new committee that was looking at your party? And that idea was completely rejected. And then shortly after, the Collective was actually shut down. Now, at that time, there was a small unelected group of people called the Secretariat running that. And one of the Secretariat was a chap called Andrew Jordan, who's now the returning officer. So that's the background. Andrew has been quite heavily involved, and he's been part of the people that are now the unelected leadership team in your party. So I think Nora's point about Andrew not being neutral is absolutely right, because that was a group of people that didn't want dual leadership, they didn't want collective leadership, they only wanted one person to lead your party, and that particular group of people were very clear on that. So I hope that bit of background information is helpful in terms of the concern that the returning officer isn't neutral as promised. I hope I haven't gone over my time, Chair.
Well, you did by 23 seconds, Eric, which is
Sorry.
not bad at all. Okay, thanks. Nigel went over by 2 minutes.
All right.
But it was good stuff, Nigel.
You need to sort
okay.
yourself out. You're chairing out, Dave.
Okay, next. Matthew Jones from Scotland.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. I think there's a few things. I mean, at the moment, obviously, conditions in this country are appalling. I mean, we have a condition in which, the government has openly actually participated in a genocide. They're not just supporting it; they're actually playing part. Has been exposed, of course, that they are actually taking a part in the slaughter of tens of thousands, if not probably many more, probably hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza. It's nakedly covered in blood. I mean, and under conditions in which actually what's happened is that the class struggle itself is being suppressed. We can see, what's happening is the unions and other people are making sure that anybody who goes into dispute is automatically isolated and kept in small area. For instance, if you take it in Birmingham, you have the destruction. Essentially, the project is the destruction of public services in Birmingham City Council, and that struggle is asked to be carried by 400 bin workers, not anybody else. None of the rest of the strength of the movement. 400 bin workers. I mean, that's a disgrace. It should be called out as a disgrace. and political question, it becomes a question of the organisation of the left. That it's in terms of actually what is the task here? To take on these people. We're talking about poverty and all this sort of stuff, but it's actually then also the way the movement actually operates in this bureaucratic method. In order to disgrace itself and in order to suppress any form of struggle, which has been going on for 30 years now at least. That strikes are isolated and ground down as opposed to being won, which they could be. And that's the point. That's a major question. And you can see this is also the question in political terms. That actually what we're seeing, of course, is this method of isolating and grinding people down. By these characters is a deliberate political question, and we should make this absolutely clear. What will be interesting, I think, will be we're going to have the conference in Scotland in a couple of weeks, and that will not be under such a control. I think that so in those terms, it will be interesting to see who's there and what they say and how it comes out, because it's going to be a great deal more expressive than the conference in Liverpool, which was deliberately controlled. Is the point? They're trying to prevent people from discussing the real points, and try and prevent people from actually, even raising points of order, or the conduct of the conference, or what was in front of us. They tried to squash it down to make sure that nothing could be said. Essentially, and it's not. I don't think it's not a casual question, and it's not a question purely of it's not a question of saying, well, these are nasty people, they're hopeless, they're incompetent, although they are. It's also a political question about what is the expression of the working class, and how is it going to actually fight? Because what the other thing, of course, is that we have a drive to war. The whole of the ruling class now is saying they're preparing for war, and the question is what the response is. And we can see obviously that if the Italians are prepared to run a political general strike, which is a considerable thing, to say, okay, we're going to walk out of work to support the Palestinians. Over 2 million Italian workers walked out in November to support the Palestinians. And under conditions in this country in which we could probably get a decent response to move, but the unions themselves have actually been suppressing their own members, even going on demonstrations. The likes of the Unite and the GMB have made absolute effort to make sure that their members are not represented, in any organised way on even on Palestine demonstrations. Never mind taking action in support of those under the cosh of the genocide. So it's all. The thing is, it's to say the struggle in your party may look sort of strange and obtuse and bureaucratic, but it should be linked in to what actually the political situation is and why we find ourselves in this situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Anybody else want to come in? If not, I'll say another few things. This time only for 30 minutes. This time just for a couple of minutes. I, together with 800,000 people, and together with various people here, have been tremendously enthused by the coming together of different types of Marxist and socialist, together with people who are not seasoned activists, together with people who have come from other campaigns, especially over Palestine and Gaza. And for me, seeing and being part of the Zara Sultana meetings has been stimulating to hear an ex-Labour MP, to hear one of the two leaders of your party coming out with socialist analysis and socialist policies has been tremendously stimulating. And I think we have to keep this going. Of course, there's going to be obstructions. 'Twas always thus, I think is a Shakespearean phrase. But we have to put up with that. We have to get over it. And so this meeting, I see some people in the chat somebody has written, just because the Socialist Workers' Party is a party in itself, it doesn't mean we shouldn't work together. Of course, it doesn't mean we shouldn't work together. I've been so fortunate in Brighton that we've had hundreds of people involved, first of all in the local collective and then in regional meetings. And we've had hundreds of people involved from all different backgrounds. And I must say, some of the most effective organisers have, of course, been comrades from the Socialist Party, Socialist Alternative, Revolutionary Communist Party, RS21, SWP, etc., etc. But they have not dominated and they have not tried to dominate. And it has been a really heartening experience. And I'm not just talking about making speeches. I'm talking about street stalls. I'm talking about demonstrations, etc., etc. So I think we have to, whatever the result of these CEC elections, I think we have to continue putting our efforts into it, trying to make it as left wing as we can, as socialist as we can, and and then as Matthew Jones has demanded, combating the threat of fascism, the threat of reform, and also the threat of the right wing parties such as Labour with their neoliberal austerity policies. So, yeah, there's going to be problems. There already have been. We need to work to get over those, and we need, certainly for the foreseeable future, I'm not saying 20 years, certainly for the foreseeable future, to keep working within your party with comrades from all different sorts of backgrounds. Right. After that, Nigel wants to. Oh, Nigel's got his thumb up. I thought he wanted to speak. Well, thank you for that expression of support, Nigel. Roger Silverman wants to come in, and then if nobody else
It's not that I want to
indicates.
speak again, but I can see many comrades here who have a great history and have a great contribution that they could make. And just want to try to encourage those comrades before we go back to the speakers panel. Um, we want to have a really open discussion and an open forum, including if there are comrades here who disagreed with anything that's been said so far, but also comrades who I can see comrades here, I won't name them, who've got really uh, a fantastic history, and we'd like to hear their contributions too.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. But I do want to say, don't all offer at once.
I can respond to a few specific questions for a wee bit, and then we can maybe go back to the floor if it gives people time
Yeah, of
to
course
think
you
for a
can.
bit longer.
Yeah, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, because as I was hearing a lot of the contributions, so many great points, won't be able to respond to them all. I want to say, first of all, that I think the key point was made by Roger when you said about the situation in the world closing in on us and in the country. All these movements and threats that we have to turn outwards to face. Just as you were saying it, or a couple of minutes after, I got a ping on my phone, an email from CND saying that the nuclear doomsday clock has been moved closer to midnight than ever before. So it's a very worrying world and a lot to be getting on with. And the fight for party democracy has to be seen in these terms and not as opposed to that and obsessing about our own navel gazing. It's about making the party campaign ready, because obviously in the last 6 months it's been underperforming those tasks. So somebody said in the comments, I think this was one of these contributions, perhaps this didn't agree with everything that's been said in the meeting. So I welcome that. And I actually did agree with this first comment, at least from him. Well, Jeremy Corbyn's no threat to the establishment at all. Why did they do so much to destroy him? And I'd say I think he was a threat to the establishment, that someone, even with his socialist programme, which was very constrained by being leader of the Labour Party and the amalgam that went on there, but especially his international politics, had become prime minister. That would be unacceptable to the powers that be. I think one of the things that Jeremy's always stood out on best as a backbencher and now a leading socialist figure has been his internationalism, his solidarity with Palestine, his support for the aforementioned CND, and so on. And I think that more than even his economic policies was what was really unacceptable. And that's also why it was so disappointing that he didn't put up a better fight against the vile witch hunting of himself, really, and of the Labour Party and the Labour left under his leadership over his support for Palestine, on which I think he's been vindicated by subsequent events in terms of being able to criticise Israel, its government, its state setup, without being a racist. In fact, it being the most anti-racist thing to do. So, yes, I think that he is a threat in that way. I think it's unfortunate that when, as Dave was saying, Zara's taken some of that up and gone further with it, including on saying that accepting the IHRA definition that conflated criticising Israel with racism was a mistake, that was seen by him and people around him, it seems, more as a criticism of him and in a factional way, as opposed to she was defending him in the way that the party should have defended him at the time, 6, 7, whatever years ago now. So I think there is a continuity with the best of Corbynism there. And I think that when he put out his video for the many saying we have to get the party back on track, we have to re-engage with where people actually are in terms of campaigns and communities and so on, yes, I agree with that. I think that it shouldn't be polarised into a zero-sum game where you have to say everything that one faction or one slate or another says is wrong. But where I disagree is I don't think that's the reason for, therefore, continuity central office. We've obviously not been doing it as well as we could in the last 6 months. And I think sharing the data and other democratic demands would be to energise the party to turn it outwards. The same comrade in the chat also asked about Transform. And this is where I suppose I would disagree more. It dissolved, so why don't these other parties dissolve into your party? I think Transform was trying to do on a smaller scale what your party's trying to do and unite a broad church of the left, and it was very short-lived thing coming out of the defeat of Corbynism in the Labour Party in 2020, whereas some of these other groups have decades-long histories, much more specific ideologies. I'm not even sure that Transform needed to have done that. That was probably good to deregister and to make clear they're not standing in elections anymore. But in terms of being one of the organisations within your party, if they'd wanted to do that, I wouldn't have minded personally. They chose not to, but they probably do have a slightly different perspective from the SWP or whoever. I think we don't want any of these individual groups dominating, or it just becoming the members of the different groups joining to fight each other. And the best way to do that is to make best use of the data and the obvious mood out there in the class to bring masses of people in to the party. And that was the promise of the summer. So those are my initial thoughts on some of the things that have been said in the discussion. Apologies if I missed anyone out in responding, and hopefully I've given some new folks some time to think of something else to say.
Well, I think the next speaker is going to be Ian Drummond, unless anybody. Leslie. Oh, good. I'm glad you put your hand up, Leslie. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, for some reason my hand gestures had all disappeared. Yeah, it's been useful and interesting hearing what comrades have to say, and I think in a lot of ways, as other people have mentioned, you know, at a conference and in the wider voting, I think the actual members were the grown-ups in the room, really, because they wanted a collective leadership and not just a straightforward punch-up between Jeremy and Zara. and obviously they voted for the inclusion of other of people to be joint members of other parties, and obviously that's been interpreted by, say, the mysterious bureaucracy about who's deciding who can put themselves forward for the CEC, because obviously many of us in this room, who've been in militant in the past but have got their disagreements with the Socialist Party and other people. But it is a scandal that somebody like Dave Nellis is not allowed to go forward. But I think, as other people have said, if there's potentially 50 to 800,000 people out there who would like something different from what they've been offered, there's a lot of frustration and there's a lot of a sense of urgency because of the danger of reform. And I think a number of people have joined, a lot of people have joined the Greens out of that frustration. But, I think we have to kind of stick with the project for the moment, give it our best shot and try and promote, democracy, accountability and all the rest of it. So it will be interesting to see what develops out of the CEC. And there's a number of other independents. I think a number of people will make up their own mind about who they're actually going to vote for, and hopefully vote for people who really want to take the thing forward. And I just finish on the point, if you think about the frustrations that Marx and Engels went through just trying to get some kind of international organisation off the ground, and then Eleanor Marx trying to help found the unions, and the people around trying to found the Labour Party. Obviously, we haven't got time on our hands, but that was a process and there was lots of struggles, and it all did get quite horrible at times. And I keep using the analogy because I'm very involved in NHS campaigning and for the Women's Hospital, to save the Women's Hospital. I use an analogy. It's a bit like giving birth. It's long, it's difficult, it's painful, it's bloody messy. And hopefully at the end of the day, we'll end up with an infant that can then develop as a toddler and then into a full-grown adult that can meet the needs of the working class. Thanks.
What a lovely metaphor. Thank you. Okay, David Stein from Edinburgh.
Hello. And a known comrade of Mr. Drummond. So, I'm just asking, am I right in thinking that the actual election, CEC election, will be by a transferable vote system? Which I hope it is, because that would be good.
Well, my reading is that is indeed the case. Is that the end of your contribution, David?
If that isn't the case, I think that's good, because it means with the candidates that are available to each region and nation, and for the what is it, political officers? Is that the phrase for them? But anyway, more importantly, for the candidates for the nations and regions, it means people won't be having to sort of agonise over, if I vote for this person I really like, but if they don't get on, I'm maybe contributing to a split vote and letting somebody else get through. But if it's STV, people will be able to really choose who their top preference is, and then a second preference, a third preference, and ultimately whoever comes out, whoever the two are that come out from the regions, or one from Scotland, whoever. Yeah, it will be whoever actually does have the majority of votes for the top two places, because of the transference system. So yeah, that's I think that's a positive thing, or something we can be positive about in looking forward after the nominations, looking forward to the actual election.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Well, this meeting will probably finish about 8 o'clock. I'd like now to come to unless anybody wants a last chance. Nick is waving.
Hi there.
Hello, Nick.
Hi there. Can you hear me? I'm not sure
I
if
can.
I'm on audio. Yeah. I'm not a revolutionary socialist. I'm a municipal socialist. I'm an environmental health officer, and but I've been involved in every initiative on the left over the past 20, 30 years, and they've all failed miserably. But we should take real encouragement because this initiative is going places. It's early days. People on the left seem to be so impatient. Just remember, you couldn't be an individual member of the Labour Party until 1924. So people need to be reminded that we are in our infancy. We've had a terrible birth. It's been every trauma you see in a birth we've had. And women will know birth is very, very painful. So the reality is we're on the way. We've got 10,000 members alone in London, 10,000. And we've got probably 50,000, maybe more members. This is something significant. And just be patient, comrades. What we've got is proto branches being formed. They're obviously being hampered by not having all the information and data of who our members are. But it's early days. We haven't even yet got the committee set up. And I'm sure we're going to take a big step forward when those elections are known. I'll be voting for people across the different slates and people who are not aligned to any slate. And we'll have a good cross section. But there's talk on this chat of people splitting already, for Christ's sake. That just confirms what a lot of people on the left are worried about, that there's some groups involved who are just part of a sectarian attempt to build their own grouping. My grouping, we've liquidated, we've put our 50k of funds available to the party. Why haven't other groups done that? Similar things happened with the formation of the Scottish Socialist Party. I gave fraternal greetings from the Socialist Alliance in London when the Scottish Socialist Party was formed. Many groups there liquidated, put their shoulders to the wheel and built a good foundation of a party. And we are on the way. So don't get disheartened. Let's stay the course. Let's keep our eyes on the prize and we can defeat reform. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Good to hear from you. Well, I think right now let's go to Andy Slack from Brighton wants to come in. Can we see you, Andy?
Hello,
Yes, good.
can you see me?
Yeah.
Hello, comrades. I'm not as experienced as many of you. I defer to that. But I hope I make a valid point. I was trying to think, what is the strategy of the for the many slate? And I can only conclude in their exclusions of the left and the bureaucratic machinations. I think they must be heavily focused on electoralism. I can only conclude that. And I'm wondering if we're on the other side of that debate, what our strategy is, because I don't particularly think electoralism at this point is actually that appropriate. I mean, I haven't really got any clear answers. And I'm actually quite happy that Polanski's doing well. In a way, he can do that bit, if you know what I mean. In some ways, I think there are other issues and other things that we need to be getting on with. And I think the For the Many slate seemed to be trying to use electoralism as a way of steamrollering member democracy and building a movement. Anyway, that's just my thought. I was just trying to work out where they're coming from with the exclusions. And I think we don't want to alienate the press, or we don't want to alienate, the majority view. And of course, if we're trying to build a consistent socialist party, we're not going to defer to that. We're going to be ourselves, Anyway, that's all I've got to say.
Okay, thanks, Andy, for that. And then Alice McCabe, and then we'll go back to the three original speakers. Nigel.
Yeah, I think Nick makes a very good point. I did introduce the idea of a split. I'm fighting very, very strongly against that. It is a bit of an elephant in the room, Nick. People are talking about it, and that's the last thing I want to see. I want unity, and we're fighting for unity as hard as we can. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thanks, Nigel. And I've lost. Somebody else had their hand up, but I can't see any hands up.
Did you say
So
Alice McCabe?
I'll go on to my other screen. Anybody else want to speak? In that case, we'll go to Ian Drummond, followed by Nora Everett, followed finally by Ian Spicer. And then,
Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah. Ian, Nora, Ian, so it could have been either way. Thanks for doing the surnames. Yeah, that was a very good last comment from Liz. I suppose my one thing to add to the optimism about there will be other opportunities is we should still make the most of the opportunity of the sign-ups of the summer saying they want to be kept in touch. I think we should still go back to them. No doubt some of them will have gone to the Greens or been demoralised or never really been supporters anyway. I know that there's some people in our side who follow reforms lists, and I'm sure they'll do the same. But hopefully they'll get a bit more rattled by getting a bit more communication from the left that's moving forward once we get things up and running after this election. I In terms of what Andy was asking, I think about electoralism, I think it's a good question. I'm not against doing electoralism, so to an extent, I don't agree about Polanski, leave it to him. I think if we let the mass split from the Labour Party, led by its immediate former leader to the current Prime Minister, become a pipeline to the Greens, even if not fully of the membership, but the electoral side of things, then that would change the nature of the left in a way that was unfortunate, given the Greens being seen as a stereotypically middle class party. Obviously, not all of their members are, whereas Labour had that link to organised Labour. So it could be changing the nature of the left in a way that would help the populist right. And I do remember some members of one of these usually non-electoral groups joking on Facebook. We thought we'd have to be arguing against electoralism, and now we're having to argue with the Corbyn side to do the elections, because it looks like we'll be getting to the point where we'll be mainly endorsing independence still in May for the English councils, because things have all taken so long. I don't know we'll be standing on Gorton. I know that a couple of other left challenges are, but I don't think YP is currently. And in Scotland, I very much hope we will be standing, certainly in targeted areas, because we can't let reform be the only new kid on the block when we've got three, actually four if you count the Scottish Greens, current or recent unpopular governments as the main established parties up here. So at the same time, I agree that electoralism can't be all or the main thing that we do. Again, thinking of party unity, it's quite funny. I didn't find a way to squeeze it in Eric's account of the history, but it's quite funny that we had to be so quiet about what was going on before the big announcements, because we were trying to rope in Labour MPs and also Independent Alliance MPs. In the end, we got one from Labour, and there was the Independent Alliance, and it turned out that was probably the most vociferous combination of the whole thing, whereas there's been a lot more unity at the grassroots. In terms of a split, I'm glad Nigel's clarified that, because it's the last thing I'd want to. I think it's why people are waiting for Jeremy Corbyn for so long, actually, that the left doesn't want to fight itself anymore. They wanted a lightning rod in someone like Corbyn, who had the unique name recognition and status as former Labour leader and so on, for everyone to unite around. In terms of how it's gone since, I'd, if anything, be thinking more of mergers than splits. I don't know of any formal grouping to have mergers with, but we certainly lost a lot of good people like Jamie Driscoll or whoever. that we should be trying to bring back. Laura Pidcock's never got on board. I think she's got a small party that doesn't do electoralism. I was talking about her with Ian from her area before the start of this thing. So yeah, in terms of Dave's question, where do we go from here from this meeting? I think there was talk of another, like, more hustings meeting, perhaps in a couple of weeks, before the end of the election for the CEC is one thing that CMWP might be doing. Also, hopefully, we'll get this video sent out there and get some more nominations and votes for a couple of people called Ian. I don't know if we had a problem with people called Ian. I mean, there are a lot of reactionaries: Ian Paisley, Ian Smith, Ian Duncan Smith. Some good ones too, including still in the Labour Party. I think from your neck of the woods, Ian Lavery, who should have stood against Starmer, he might have won. But yeah, we have to keep up democratizing and turning the party outwards. And the CEC election's a good time to do it when people are talking about that, and talking about it, as Roger reminded us, in terms of a world that really needs it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Now, I see that Alice McCabe would like to come in. So before we call Nora and Ian Spencer, Alice McCabe, you are muted. You're still muted. You have to unmute. At the bottom left of your screen, you'll have a sign called audio. Alice, I'll bring in Nora now and see if you can unmute yourself. Okay, Nora? Over to you, Nora.
Okay, I'm going to say some opinions now. I thought what Liz said in her first contribution was very interesting, and there is polarization going on in Barnsley, and it's mainly on social media and about the black and white, very much so. People who are good socialists, and if they were talking about future policies, they were fine. But as soon as they start talking about the different, particularly the SWP and Counterfire, the different factions, then this, abusive language comes up, and they've gone completely. One lot's gone to vote for Corbyn and co, and one lot's looking at the left slate. It's such a shame. But we don't get to talk about policies, and that's part of the problem. But as far as polarization, in my experience, anything that the left have been happily, or not perhaps happily, but really trying to work together with all the different groups, and various groups have set up with lots of different groups on them, perhaps too many cooks, that we haven't come together as a mass. But it's always been the HQ, I'll call them that, who have actually come down on them like a ton of bricks and picked they've tried to, because they are so determined not to have any of the what they call hard left involved, any collaboration between us, they come down on it and call us all hard left and whatever they can, and it's nasty stuff. So I don't think it's us picking fights. I think it's them. I think it's not just the infighting that's caused people to go away. I used to work in volunteering and recruiting volunteers for various charities and things. And there's no point in recruiting people in a voluntary capacity unless you give them something to do. And there was no communication in the first few months of the summer, and there was nothing happening. Things could have been set up in the regions. They could have put more effort into it. The data was a problem, so we can't get in touch with everybody, but they can, and they could have made an effort to bring people together through their database and let us get on and get to know people who are members in our area and come together and start doing things, and that would have kept them. There's one thing I want you to know, which I don't think anybody does, and I've lost my bit of paper that tells me. Yesterday, your party is on the Electoral Commission, and Andrew Jordan is now the nominating officer. One of the MPs that left us was. It's also on Companies House, and there was 5 or 6 directors, all the MPs, and now there's just 4, which are the 2 remaining MPs, Jeremy and Zara. But 3 of the directors have put an application into Companies House yesterday to dissolve the company, which is a bit iffy. Are they thinking that the CEC will set up a new company with different directors, or are they trying to push Zara out completely? I don't know, but you need to know that there's a lot of shenanigans still going on behind the scenes. And it's the 3 male MPs. Zara hasn't signed the document. I don't even know if she knows. My last point is, last week we decided to have this meeting with this subject because everybody was so angry with what had gone on with the bans and the prescribing and the whole atmosphere of it. So what are we going to do? I mean, we were talking about all coming together and making a noise. Are we going to bother? Are we going to fade away and just let the elections happen and do as Dave says, and Roger has said as well, to try and be a good influence within whatever happens at the new CEC? Or are we going to make a noise and challenge? It's I'm still angry. I've calmed down a bit, but they keep getting away with it. They actually said in the letter that the email they sent us in December, just before Christmas, that they were not going to have a third-party organisation because they didn't want to waste the money. But they did say, and I'm reading it out, that they will go ahead on that basis, that they will organise so that they have an independent third-party scrutineer to be appointed to oversee the election. Well, Andrew Jordan is not an independent third-party scrutineer, and it could be that anybody who is not elected on the CEC could challenge these elections as unfair because they are not keeping to party rules. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks. Now, Alice, your hand is up. And you've unmuted yourself. This is your chance.
I just wanted to say a little bit about my group of friends. We're all really excited. You know, at last we'd got a party that we could believe in. I'm the only one who joined, and I've only done it. I'm a pensioner now, so I pay me £1.25 a month to get the emails and to be able to vote. And I'm slowly learning more and more through watching your calls, Crispin Flintoff's show on a Sunday, and Wednesday night he's been doing CEC hustings, which has been really useful for their independence. I ended up watching For the Many, whatever they're calling themselves, their supposed hustings a few weeks ago. And it was just like, right, you are what I thought you were, so I won't be bothering with you anymore, sort of thing. And I think it's too soon for anyone to be standing in elections when, especially after what we've just heard from Nora, I'm trying not to swear, put it that way. I really hoped this was going to be something different. I'm housebound. My health is absolutely shite. And I thought I was going to be getting hybrid meetings and actually be involved because I've felt so left out as my health has declined. And I don't know, shall I just leave it at that? I haven't been active politically for years because my health just didn't let me. And so thank you for inviting me to take part, and I'll keep educating myself the best I can, and we'll see what happens.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Alice. What is your, are you a member of a local Your Party proto branch?
I found out I think it was on Sunday, that there is actually a rush home group because we're not Gorton anymore in Fallowfield since the boundary changed. I'm now rush home. So
Well,
I
good luck
will
in
be
getting in touch with them
contacting them.
because they should, of course, be having hybrid meetings
Yes, because
in
this is what
person
we
as
were
well as.
told we were having. And excuse me, we get emails every so often that don't really
Well,
tell you much.
get in touch and say, can we have a meeting? And this is what I'd like on the agenda.
Mm,
Good luck.
yeah.
Good luck, Alice, and good luck with
Okay,
your
thanks.
health.
Thanks.
Thanks. And final speaker is Ian Spencer.
Thank you, comrades, and thanks for all the contributions. Um, Matthew started off by talking about the way in which the system is collapsing, and I think he's quite correct. I think what we see in your party is really an expression of the coming into being of a proletariat for itself. Of course, the proletariat exists in itself. We all understand that. But for the first time in my lifetime, we're actually starting to see a worldwide movement, a worldwide proletarian movement where increasingly the social relations of capitalism are becoming transparent. The sheer and utter butchery in Palestine, the sheer and utter butchery in other parts of the world that have been turned into almost a wasteland. Think of the Iraq War and so on, costing 1 million lives. So I think your party is a concrete expression of that coming into being, and the split, if you can call it that, the division within your party is a real one, and the idea that somehow it could be kind of that crack could be papered over, I think is fanciful. I think it's a real one because what we will see from Jeremy Corbyn, I suspect, is a move towards a kind of back towards an idea of a Keynesian solution to the problems faced by capitalism. And you see it every day. I mean, some of you have been maybe on YouTube and you've watched Richard Murphy's podcasts about modern monetary theory or whatever. And modern monetary theory is the sort of last hurrah of Keynesianism, in the sense that the idea that we could just sort of organize things in a nicer, pinker, fluffier kind of capitalist type of way. No one who understands the history of capitalism will know that that is going to be anything like possible. There is something else as well. If you look at the United States, for the first time really since the civil rights movement, since the mass movement against the Vietnam War, there is a proletariat in the United States that's moving against the way things are. And it's not just Trump's government. If you look at the extent to which the bottom third, if you like, of the United States working class has seen really just a constant decline in their standards of living. At best, by the time you get to the bottom half, as it were, it has at least been static, if not actually in decline. So there is a real movement in the world, and to not engage with that would be a kind of an act of criminal neglect. I think if we look at your party and the way in which it's going on, there was some talk about, for example, the regional aspect. I attended the regional assembly in Teesside. It was a political meeting meets a human resources away day. It was with all the kind of problems that that entails. Again, it was the kind of superficial appearance of participation without it making the slightest difference whatsoever. So there would be, for example, a table where people could say anything they wanted, and somebody would be taking notes, and somebody would be writing on a flip chart, and all the rest of it, and all that eventually just gets consigned to the bin. Not even the dustbin of history, but just the bin. The idea that will be passed up the chain of command, and on a Monday morning, Jeremy Corbyn would be presented with a pile of flip charts, going, "Oh yes, very good idea that one. Yes, yes, we'll do that." What nonsense! So, for example, these regional assemblies, if they're to continue, should have real delegate powers. They should be able to submit motions to conference. They should have a budget, and so on and so forth. And I think it would actually be quite a good thing to have that kind of regional structure. But that remains to be seen. Um, I think the other thing about the real difference, the real fracture, let's have a little think about the Greens for a moment, shall we? This is a pro-capitalist, pro-NATO party, and Polanski has said that with a different leader in the Labour Party, he would get into a coalition with the Labour Party, to get into a coalition with the pro-Zionist, pro-genocide Labour Party, and to what end exactly? Now, there is, believe it or not, a small groupuscule, a couple of individuals who call themselves the Bolshevik Caucus within your party. I don't know very much about them, but at one of the hustings meetings, they said, well, under no circumstances should we have anything to do with the Greens. Hang on a minute. If 100,000 people join the Greens and the Greens are forced to the left and they do actually come up with a socialist platform, then under those circumstances, and providing we don't end up compromising ourselves by entering into getting into office and then just administering cuts and that kind of thing, then there's no reason why we couldn't, in principle, have some kind of working relationship. But for the moment, we have to consider the Green Party as being, as I say, a pro-capitalist, pro-NATO party. And from that point of view, I really don't want very much to do with them at all. Our aim is to put forward the case for socialism, a case for a mass socialist party, not a sordid compromise with a group of people who would prop up an Andy Burnham Labour Party, for example. People have talked in terms of, Labour Party's finished, the Tory Party's finished, and of course that could be the case, but it could also be a case that their death has been greatly exaggerated. It's possible to imagine reform crumbling fairly quickly, given it's going to be obviously the case that they are just the Tory party, but without the finesse, as it were. And similarly, what I see in County Durham, where reform is in office, they're not necessarily that popular. They're not necessarily doing anything that anybody particularly approves of, and they will be implementing cuts. They will be putting up the council tax and all the rest of it, and then they'll start to have to be answerable for what they've done. I think the crucial thing here is that it is an expression of the class itself. And I think that, again, is the crucial distinction between the many, which doesn't want to see an expression of the working class. And what we see is a kind of Benite state socialism at best. Liz Russell made a very important observation about HQ behaving in the way that it does. Look, the HQ is behaving exactly the way in which the HQ behaved in the Labour Party. All the things that were done to Jeremy Corbyn to undermine him are being done by Jeremy Corbyn. And let's not pretend it's just his staffers. It's being done with the connivance of Jeremy Corbyn to undermine the left in your party. And let's have a look then at the relationship between Stalinism and social democracy, because what we see with Jeremy Corbyn is a person who quite clearly is influenced by the idea of a British road to socialism. He writes for the Morning Star. The Morning Star has endorsed the many. What we're seeing, therefore, is that Stalinism as an influential milieu is far from dead, and it's going to be it's going to continue to be a problem. And I think therefore people like Zara Sultana have been right to call that out, and I think it's right to call out the fact that Corbyn effectively, in adhering to the notion of a national road to socialism, is consigning it to oblivion. If we have a truly internationalist movement at the moment, if only through Palestine solidarity, but it is not only through Palestine solidarity, it's in recognition of the fact that people are being impoverished worldwide. And if there is that internationalist movement to kind of say, well, we'll stand on the basis of a national road to socialism, is a national road to oblivion. One of my earliest memories is of the murder of Salvador Allende, who had the delusional notion that you could just simply take office and legislate socialism into being, and see where that got him. And we've all look. Jeremy Corbyn is at best a left Keynesian, perhaps not even a left Keynesian. But even he was able to kind of get army officers starting to talking in terms of treason. So the idea that any kind of movement towards socialism will not be greeted with a violent response on the part of the state is fanciful. And therefore we need to plan for that. And we need to think, therefore, seriously about what the nature of the party is, and about the nature of our party, and about a serious proletarian response. There really is only one solution. I mean, Rosa Luxemburg famously talked about socialism or barbarism. At the moment, it's looking like we'll get barbarism if we're lucky. But I think the possibility of socialism is now, for the first time, I think, in my lifetime, a distinct possibility. Whether I live to see it or not is another matter. But I think it's a distinct possibility, and that's why I'm embracing your party, and in particular the Grassroots Left Slate, which has a programme at least. That's it.
Okay. Thanks for that, Ian. Thank you, everyone, for attending. It's been really interesting. Lots of different contributions. What we would like is to, and we'll do this no doubt in our own groups, in our own networks, in our own proto branches, in our own movements, but to discuss how and when and where we can be most effective in affecting the CEC, its deliberations, and in affecting the direction that the party takes. So on that note about we will need to consider how to make a noise, where to make a noise, and how effective we can be. In other words, to be activist socialists within your party. On that note, I'm going to close the meeting and thank everyone for coming along. Okay, thanks, comrades.